On March 4th, 1993, ESPN held its very first ESPY Awards, joining the likes of Oscars, Grammys, and Emmys. Let's dive into the history of the ESPYs today on Daily Sports History. Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide to a rapid deep dive into sports history every day. Today, ESPN is a major player in sports, but back in the day, they were throwing everything on the wall to see if it stuck. It was a small cable channel that started in 1979 that couldn't afford Major League Sports to be played live on their channel and did whatever they could to be part of the sports world, including playing frisbee games, lacrosse, or bowling as their major sports programming. And of course, SportsCenter was big as well. But in the early 1980s, an executive at ESPN named John Walsh had this idea of creating an awards for sports. The Oscars and the Grammys and the Emmys were major players and did really well on television when they aired. And he thought, why not do this with sports? It was an ingenious way to get top athletes on their channel that they normally only got by replaying old games or replaying highlights of the previous day's games. And then in 1991, when Magic Johnson retired due to contracting the HIV virus that many thought was a death sentence, the idea even became connected to him, as they thought maybe we'll name it the Magics. And they floated around too many different names on what might be. And they eventually settled on ESPY, which stands for Excellence in Sports Performance Yearly Award. I know, it doesn't really fit. They're being very generous on how they get to ESPY. But it also goes with their brand of ESPN as well. So the first ESPYs starts to come together, and they want to have it at a location that is known for sports. So in 1993, they select New York City at Madison Square Garden, the mecca of sports at the time. And they wanted to pull out all the stops to make it look like something everyone wanted. And they needed a host for their very first one. And they were looking at the other awards programs, and they normally had a comedian or a funny actor do the hosting, as they could make jokes and have enjoyable commentary throughout the show. And at the time, Dennis Miller was actually in a unique position, as he was actually also doing a football broadcast that they tested out to see how a comedian would work in the football broadcasting booth. And so they selected him to be the first host of the ESPYs. Now, they started out using fan voting because the point of this was to get the fans involved and want to have the fans watch the show and be knowing that they voted for this guy and they hope he would win. As for the type of awards they had awards for each major sport. So NBA Player of the Year was Michael Jordan. Major League Baseball Player of the Year was Dennis Eckersley. Best Female Athlete was Monica Seals. Best NFL Athlete was Emmitt Smith. NHL Athlete was Mario Lemieux. They had some fun ones too, which was Outstanding Performance in a Commercial, which was Larry Johnson for his grandmama commercials for Converse. And Outstanding Performance in Show Business, which was awarded to Shaquille O'Neal for doing a rap on the Arsenio Hall show. But by far, the most important and the biggest award was the award named after Arthur Ashe, and it's called the Arthur Ashe Courage and Humanitarian Award, as Arthur Ashe showed strength and courage through his adversity he dealt with all his career due to the color of his skin. Does not mean this is just an award given out to athletes or people in sports that dealt with racism, but just as someone dealing with courage. And this moment here is probably the biggest, most important moment ever in ESPY history. And without this award and this moment, The ESPYs may have just been an afterthought. This got so much play and so much talk about that it was huge. The award was given out to Jimmy Valvano, who was a coach of the 1983 North Carolina State basketball team that won the championship off a last second play. You've probably seen the video of him running around crazy trying to find someone to hug, so excited. He dealt with controversy and eventually got out of coaching and went to broadcasting. But what was emotional and what made it more important was that he had been dealing with cancer. And so he was given this award as he battled cancer. And unfortunately, at that moment, he was, many thought, unable to talk or even walk. It surprised even his good friend, Dickie V, another commentator, that he was even there to accept the award. But he stood up and gave a speech that is still quoted to this day and has the great line at the end: never give up. Never, ever give up. And those words in that moment struck a chord, especially 2 months later when he passed away. It was such a monumentous moment. And I encourage you, and I'll put a link in the show description of that speech because it's an amazing speech if you haven't seen it. And for me to read it out won't do it justice, but it was an amazing thing. And it was the last award of the night, and it was the most talked about thing throughout the country. And 2 months later, after he passed away, it was still the most talked about thing throughout the country. Now, the ESPYs are still around to this day, still going around, having different hosts, having different categories. It's blown up into a huge Hollywood event. And they usually hold it now on that one day a year. There's no U.S. professional sports games after the Major League Baseball has their All-Star game. There is no baseball, no basketball, no football, no hockey played on that day. And that's usually when it's held now. The one day when there's no sports, they give you sports to consume, which is what ESPN wants to do. But without it, we wouldn't have that great moment from Jimmy V that's still inspiring people to this day, over 30 years after his passing, and something we should always remember. Thank you for listening to today's Daily Sports History. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening. It really means a lot to me, and I hope you could tell someone else about it and come back tomorrow for more Daily Sports History.